Hi guys, welcome back to Casting Commons, the show where we talk and discuss all things pauper. I am your host Teasdale, and this is my co-host, the Mare Retriever himself, Reese.
Hello.
So Paul, what have you been doing today? Or this week even? Don't know why I said today.
Played Pop Ref now. That was pretty good. Pretty decent turnout. Played with Ultratron for the first time. Missed going undefeated slightly because I misplayed because I'm just not used to the deck at all. But yeah, it was fun. And then I drafted some Lord of the Rings in paper as well. Didn't get the undefeated on that one, thankfully. I've redeemed myself. But yeah, that was a really fun format as well. I wouldn't say it's massively balanced. Like the green seems pretty bad. But it is really fun.
That's sweet. So did you just literally just 408 or the whole thing? Completely
for Lord of the Rings. For Lord of the Rings, yeah.
Not too badly going.
I had some pretty powerful rares. Anduil and Horn of Condor, both for like the insane.
Not gonna lie, not common, not interested. I have no idea what those cards are. But unfortunately, on the undefeated on the Ultratron, it is a difficult deck, and there's quite a few weird lines you can take and things like that. So I guess obviously over time and more playtesting with the deck definitely would.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was knowing which spots I could actually go for it in, or which spots I needed to just do like a mini weather.
Yeah.
Or like set up like how many stars and spheres you're supposed to hold in your hand to like boost the next weather, or if you're just supposed to play them out and stuff like that. But it was a really fun deck to play, and it'll be a fun deck to learn and to play more.
Yeah, I guess the big thing for me is obviously it's a great deck to learn, great deck to play for sure, but it's a deck that you can only get minimal testing of, I feel, because I can't really play. I'm not fast enough to personally play it online, so you only get like old school testing in terms of you go to event, like you go to your local game store, paper test, all that sort of stuff. So for sure, but definitely a sweet one.
What about yourself?
Yeah, again, it's probably the same as I do every week. Not really much outside of actual playing. I've played a few leagues just testing ideas. I've been testing like a mono black reanimator briefly, so hopefully that'll turn into a video somewhat soon. And testing more on like a Rakdos control as well. Cool. Just revisiting like wildfire piles basically with deadly disputes and things as a draw engine.
And I'm the reanimator, is that a machine with the new cyclers from Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, so it's got the new troll. I'm not gonna say the back half of its name, the one mana troll. It seems pretty sweet. It's kind of like I've kind of tried to not lean into the reanimator side and just have it as it has that in, as long as it's like a control package where, based on a list that we might talk about further down the line, I feel like it's a bit different and more maximised than on the turn 2 Exhume.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun one. But Jeskai Affinity as well is another thing that I need to keep. I want to keep harping on about. This deck is seriously like underrated. Like I've seriously been impressed with this deck, and it just got so much better with Lembas as well. So definitely, please check out that video on my channel because it is great if you have seen it. Honest to God, I'm not even joining. That deck is secretly better than Grixis Affinity. I'm calling it now.
It does seem pretty powerful. Like just the engines it can pull together.
Yeah,
it's definitely worth watching.
Well, enough of my shameless plugs. Onto the stuff that everyone's here for, I guess. We will dive into the news first and then go into the challenges because we have 3 challenges to look at this week. We've got the showcase on Saturday. We have the normal Saturday challenge and the Sunday challenge.
News-wise, I don't know if there's much you want to cover. I don't know how much has happened.
No, there's not really too much. I guess as a side note that we did right, there was an interesting debate going around on Twitter, which wasn't just Pauper related, it was more Magic Online related. Obviously about if events were to spread throughout the week instead of just being focused on the Saturday and Sunday. It was an interesting discussion, to be fair, because there was quite a few PFP members. There was LSV, Justin Gennari, all that sort of stuff. Just generally talking about this sort of thing. It was an interesting debate, to be fair. So I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it. I'm kind of
Yeah, I
on
think
the fence.
a lot of people were pretty on board with it,
Mm,
or at least trialing it. I know Weber commented on it as well, and LSV were both on board with why would you not run more events through the week,
mm.
basically. For myself, it would work quite well because I am usually busy on weekends, so I don't really get to play in the challenges that often. Um, but I could see it going both ways. But I think it'll be useful to trial, if Daybreak have a look at that.
Yeah, I think I do agree. I think I'm pretty much the same as well. It's just weekend time is pretty sparse, especially to do challenges and things. But through the week, I'm pretty free to at least do larger events, and it's a lot of time when I record. So,
Yeah.
but I do also understand the importance of making sure these events are accessible to the masses. And
Mm.
generally, if it is a big enough and a more important event, I do kind of tend to agree the weekend is better for it. But it would be interesting to trial at least somewhat doing some other events throughout the week and
Yeah.
see what happens for sure. But yeah. So guys, if you have seen this tweet and you have seen the comments, I guess, hit us up in the YouTube comments below if you are watching on YouTube, and if you are listening, just hit us up on Twitter. As you can see, our handles are TSLMTG and THX and yeah, just check us out. We can obviously respond to those if you want to let us know what you guys
Yeah,
think
yeah,
of this
definitely.
debate. Even just tagging us into the tweet itself as well. So, and see what you think. Anyways, on to the showcase challenge, the additional challenge from the weekend, I guess.
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting one, really. It was, I guess, similar to the challenges we saw last week, in terms of the top eight results, but then there was some wild, wild inclusions in the top eight and top 10, I guess. Um, so first place we had Affinity, basically running it back. Affinity's always solid. Second place, Kiln Fiend, one which I don't think I would have guessed that would have been there in 50 guesses.
Hmm.
Third and fourth was a green red Ponza and a blue black Terror running the Lorien and cutting on the lands. And then fifth through eighth was a Boros Synth, a Bentry Emissary Kuldorfer, and two more blue black Terrors. One ran Loriens and one didn't. And then the near misses Poison Storm in ninth.
Woo! Let's
Was
go!
a pretty cool result. And then 10th Walls. So there's some pretty wild between Kiln Fiend, Poison Storm, and Walls in the top 10. It's some pretty wild decks getting up there.
Hmm. I think, to me, the first one to touch on, I'm not actually gonna touch on Poison Stone first. I'll leave that to the last, the end of the resistance. First of all, Affinity seems to be absolutely. I don't want to say nowhere, but it's definitely not the big metagame percentage that it was. But it is
Yeah.
always constantly just in the first place spot for generally. It seems to hit first place for at least one of the challenges.
Mm.
Second thing I would like to note, which was quite interesting to me, is Terra obviously still on a tear. But
Yeah.
interestingly enough, the two Lorien builds, I half expected them to kind of meet in the middle of where they would cut some lands, but not go to as low as full blown. I will cut all my four lands for these four Loriens.
Yeah, and just run 16
Yeah,
lands.
like 16, 17 or something like that, all that sort of stuff. But still run the four Loriens because the cards and Ash Barons for an island's pretty good for the deck. So I'm surprised that they all haven't started to shift, but I guess, and it was interesting that
Yeah.
both had went to full 15 lands that did run
Yeah.
Lorien.
Yeah, 4 Loriens and 15 lands from the two that were on it.
Mm.
And the other one's just on regular 18 land Terror.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, obviously Terra's still doing really well, like both versions, obviously in the top eight there. And last week we seen it in both challenge top eights as well. Again, both versions. Interestingly, the Ponza, I believe, was running the Ent, and it wasn't running the Mumakeel. I don't think, if I find it, yeah, but it was running 4 Ents and it cut down to 17 lands. which was pretty cool. We obviously touched on that last week, that we were unsure on. Obviously, it looked good, but if you still have the power of the turn 1 players, and clearly there's something there. It's done well 2 weeks in a row now, with that style of Ponza.
Yeah, the thing that I do like about this is it's not gone like last week where it went all in. It ran like 15 lands. And hitting those 2 land drops seems to be really key naturally for the deck to go turn 1, 1 drop, turn 2, I have access to 3 or 4 mana. Seems really good and really crucial. So the fact that it kind of went half and half, and then I kind of understand it, and I do think it kind of has a slot, because Ponza does have really awkward draws generally because you're just relying off the top of your deck. Ent can be obviously cascaded into from Altasaur, and it'd be a really solid threat. And it's also another threat that kind of gets you to your other threats. So in that sort of sense, I don't want to say I like it, but I kind of agree with I can find it finds its slot just because of that. It's like a threat that kind of gets you to your other threats when you're struggling. So not completely shutting off all your lands and got still on 17 is still pretty.
Yeah, the reach on it as well is not nothing. I always found with Ponza that if you're against stuff like Fae or course Skyfisher decks, you were always scrapping to try and find an Altasaur. So you had some sort of defense. Now you've essentially got 8 guys that can block flyers. And then obviously Altasaur cascading into End is huge. Like, it's a ridiculous amount of power and toughness on the table.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But it's definitely a sweet one, and I really do like. I like the addition of Ent in here when it hasn't cut the lands. Definitely a sweet one.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's cut, because it's cut, obviously, like I say, I think about 1 to 2 lands. Not 100% certain on that. How many? And then 2 Jewel Thieves. So
yeah,
interesting that's where the line drew, because I really did like Jewel Thief in there, but I guess it is also in theory the weakest card.
Yeah, I think land wise, from what I've seen, Ponza's usually on 19-ish. So I guess it's the 2 lands, but you've got 4 cyclers. And Jewel Thief was one. It's sort of it's a good body, but it always felt like you would rather just have more Landwire Visionaries anyway, if you could. So I guess it's sort of the obvious cut. It's getting very close to a deck of just all 4 of Ponza nowadays. It's all it's got left is 3 Screds, 2 Jewel Thief, and 2 Wild Growth outside of the mana base. I imagine if it gets some slightly altered tools, that would change as well. But yeah, it's pretty cool to see Ents obviously seeing play.
Sure.
I think one thing I thought when I seen this top 8 was I'm surprised how well Kilnfin did in the top 8 itself.
Yeah.
Given the pile of removal between Terra, Boros, Synth, and it just dodged all the edicts, all the snuff outs.
Yeah, definitely.
And got to that 2nd place.
I would guess, to me, Ponza does seem pretty free when you look at, and I guess that's kind of what it's hoping for. Is Ponza is I don't know this particular weekend, but Ponza generally over the past few weekends has been like a massive part of the challenge results. So I guess hoping to verse that and hoping for the best is kind of its game plan, I guess.
Yeah, it did beat Ponza in the semis. And it played, I think, against the mono red deck in the first round of the top 8, which I guess it's not the worst matchup. They are running obviously a lot of burn, but it's less burn than not, because it's a burn tree version. It cuts like the chain lightnings and lava darts and stuff like that, so it is only 4 blasts, 4 bolts. So yeah, I guess the matchups played out well.
Yeah.
But yeah, really cool to see Kilnfin doing well.
Yeah, it's nice to see it appear, since it's got basically no new toys for God knows how long. I guess we got to touch on not even the elephant in the room, the best thing. It just missed out on, probably on Breakers. That Poison Storm made it to 9th place, and it was running the new Lorien, which as soon as I seen it in Terra, I thought this is also another deck that can really use the Lorien. Like, it needs more blue sources anyways, so that's great. And then it can easily just cast the Lorien Revealed as it can easily with the Vivisurgeon's Insight. So
Yeah.
definitely cool to see, and cutting on the obvious deep analysis as well.
Yeah, I thought it also adding moment spacing. I
Mm,
thought was pretty interesting. It definitely seems really good at the moment.
mm-hmm.
With the amount of like terror and stuff running about that you can give yourself an extra turn. But yeah, three Lorien and three moment space, I guess, are the big diversions from sort of a stock Poison Storm list.
Yeah, definitely. It's a deck that that moment piece has been in the sideboard for, so I guess it's an obvious shift when you think about it. I guess that it's like terror's everywhere. I don't want to die game one to terror. How do I?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty nice, pretty sweet one. Um, Still keeping out of the 4 Roots main as well, which is seems to be a staple now. Moving to Dispels in the side too over the. I'm not gonna be able to remember the counter spell. The poison counter spell. Bring the ending. Is it
Oh,
called?
the one, the blue
Yeah,
one. Yeah,
the
yeah.
one that's a
I'm not sure
quench.
on its name.
Yeah, I think it's called Bring the Ending, and it's quench basically. But then if they have 3 poison counters, it's a 1 and a blue counter
The
spell.
hard counter, yeah.
So
Yeah, dispels and negates as well.
yeah,
I guess they just value the hard counter being on all the time.
mm,
I guess from the limited play I have played of Poison Storm, it feels like the three number's not really a number that you stop on. It's usually none and then 1 to 10, or it's usually like 1 or 2 and then 8 all in one
yeah,
turn.
yeah, definitely.
So I can see why the value in the hard counter really early is pretty good there.
Yeah,
But I like how clean this sideboard is, which was
yeah.
4 Dispel, 4 Negate, 4 Nihil Spellbomb, 3 Serrated Arrows. Job done.
Yeah, it is a weird one. I really do want to know how the serrated arrows felt, because in any time that I've played this, the decks that seem obvious where you want it, it's pretty poor.
Yeah.
So like my initial thoughts, like you want it against fairies or what have you, and it's just really awkward because their game plan is generally I'm going to bring in a nulls and still sabotages anyways. So your
Yeah.
sideboard strategy is just like my sideboard strategy now against fairies is take out as many artifacts as I possibly can and leave them with dead cards.
Yeah.
And
Which that doesn't
yeah,
allow.
so it's pretty interesting. I would like to know how the serrated arrows has been for Peto Presidente, because he has played it before in a challenge, I believe, and he did quite well with it. And it's definitely a sweet one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But sweet deck overall, and sweet top 8 to be fair for a showcase challenge. Generally, if a challenge is going to be boring and stock, usually the showcase is it, because it's a bit of a higher prestige than a normal challenge.
Yeah, I would say interesting top 10. If you cut out the Poison Storm and Walls, the top 8 sort of just held up by Kiln Fiend.
Yeah, true.
Otherwise, it's just basically a lot of terror, and then the main players with the mono red deck being a Burning Tree version rather than a normal Cold Offer or a Pinger.
Yeah.
But yeah, especially if you include the top 10 there with the second place from Kiln Fiend, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. So are you happy to move on? Next
Yeah.
segment. So we're gonna go into our deep dive for this showcase. Just try it out, make it a bit cleaner. So we'll move on to our Saturday showcase, Deck Tech, and do you want to take it away since you picked it?
Yeah, so it was the 19th place Elves, piloted by Stone Fork Mystic, or Stoned Fork Mystic, which I thought was quite a funny name. But yeah, Elves placing pretty well again. It's been a while. It's not a what I would call a stock elf list either. It's pretty heavy on 4 wind and weight and cuts down lead the stampedes just to 2. And it also plays 4 Nettle Sentinels in the main, which is it's quite a cool card that allows you to go off from a small board position. Like as soon as you get a Nettle Sentinel and a Birch Law going, like you can spew pretty easily. So if you do get like fumed away, you can rebuild quite well. The Sentinel survives, and then if you just play Birch Law, you've got a bunch of mana. So losing stuff like the priest isn't as big of a deal. But especially with the development of the mono red decks, and a lot of them are now not playing End the Festivities in the main, or sometimes at all, in the sides because they're going to cast into the fires. The Elves deck is becoming a little bit more interesting. Like it looks like it could be good again. One thing I did think with this list in particular, it's only running 2 Jespira Sentinels. If it was me, I would probably be on 4. Just obviously it's a decent combo with Nettle Sentinel because you get the untap. But also 2 toughness is just really important at the moment. One of the big factors why Elves got knocked down so hard is just everything died to End the Festivity type cards. So with your Nettle Sentinels and Jespira Sentinels surviving, you do get a bit more game there.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'd be the same as you. I think the Jespira Sentinels are probably on 4 anyways. Just the closest thing to a Birch Law impression as you can get. And also being 2 toughness, as you say, is good. And it's also a blue source when, especially in the sideboard, it has 2 negates and 2 dispels and 2 blue mental blasts. And you only have basically 4 Birch Laws and 2 Jespira Sentinels, right?
Yeah.
To cast these blue cards. It's a bit awkward. So I definitely think I'd be up on the 4 as well. Because I'd say you're already pretty constrained anyways, because you're running 4 Distant Melodies, man.
Yeah, it is pretty bold with the 4 melodies and only the 6 sources to get them, but I guess that's where the wind and ways come in, being cheaper and easier to set up your blue sources. I guess you can rebuild a lot easier off a wind and way as well. If you just like have a land and a Landwar Elf, you can still wind away where the lead the Stampede would be stranded.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting though, because most times, again, I'm not really an Elves expert, but most times whenever I see Wind and Way in Elves, they're usually cutting down on the distant melodies, and it's usually Wind and Ways and leads. But interesting that they've chose to keep Wind and Way at 4, distant melody at 4, but then only cut the leads to 2, so you've got up on draw spells too, which is an interesting stance, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is something I'll definitely look to give a go. I really enjoy playing Elves. And this is a cool list, and cool setup for the list.
I guess another thing to note is similar to Kiln Fiend, I guess, a deck that hasn't really been on the map for quite a while. I'd say it's pretty much similar to Elves, but again, both of those seem like it's a pretty free Ponza matchup, especially game 1. You've got Quirion Ranger, which again nullifies any land destruction completely, and you can function off basically 1 or 2 lands, and they only have 3 Screds main. Seems pretty free to me.
Yeah, I guess with like you say, the Ponza being on the up, things like Terra cutting down on the fumes, like they used to be pretty high on fumes because of how good and how played, I guess, Kuldotha was. It's sort of not really that much of a thing at the moment. Obviously, the Burning Tree version did well, but barring that, like most of the burn decks are like either lower down or ping a burn, not playing Kuldothas. Obviously leads to Elves being a bit more playable. I think Elves is one of those decks. I know you wrote an article about what downshifts would boost decks up, and you had like Ancient Ziggurat, or what's the Ancient Ziggurat that taps for colours?
Unclaimed Territory.
Unclaimed Territory for slivers. Elves is one where something like a Heritage Druid or one of those like uncommon slots getting downshifted would probably do a lot for the deck.
Yeah, definitely. It was a deck I definitely considered when writing that article. One big thing that actually eventually put me off it is obviously we've seen it in Legacy over the years. It's a deck that's either probably not playable or close to being like fringe playable or it's busted.
Yeah.
And it's like just balancing that to like I couldn't find a card that I thought wouldn't take it over the edge.
Yeah.
Which is why I ended up not writing about it, because I think like Wildwood Symbiote, Heritage Druid, all those sort of things are just like, whoa, simmer down. Yeah,
really.
simmer down kind of thing. So
but yeah, that's it for me on that deck. A cool one to see. Always good to see elves back. 19th's pretty good showing. I believe it was the only elf deck there. So hopefully it picks up a bit more and gets developed a bit more to compete with what's doing well at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a sweet one. Interesting though, Rapping Vigors is the only thing I've got to mention. Is it seems to be to stop Cannonade or those sort of effects. It's fully on Negate, Dispel, Blue Mental Blast, which with two Sentinels is probably a little greedy for me. But I guess Rapping Vigor is 2, so I can kind of, swings and roundabouts.
The sort of the winding way of giving you that buyback for when you can't counter those effects, because you can rebuild with like less mana.
Yeah.
I guess it's probably the idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, I think I'll probably build this up, but I imagine I'll be on 4 Jespara Sentinels instead. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
We'll go at FNM.
It's definitely a sweet one. Do you want to move on to Saturday?
Yeah.
So Saturday challenge, I can go over it, I guess.
Yeah, go for it.
So first place was Blue White Gates. Second place was Boros Synth. We had third and fourth place, which was Cycle Storm. We've got a lot of decks that are shown there, reminding people they exist. And we had Ponza, again with the Ent in. And then 5th to 8th place, we had Familiars, Blue Black Terror with Lorien in, Jeskai Ephemerate, and Gardens, with 9th and 10th near misses being a Pingerburn and Blue Black Terror with Lorien in again. This is the Saturday challenge.
Yeah, it's a pretty spicy one. Obviously, return of Gates. We haven't seen any Gates really even played in much of a number for a while. I think the last week in 2 challenges we had 2 Gate decks.
Yeah.
So seeing one return and then come first is pretty good. Cycle Storm in the top 4 is a spicy one. And obviously, more 1 mana land cyclers from Lord of the Rings. The Loriens in Terra and the Ents in Ponza doing the work. They're obviously going to become a mainstay, I would say, at this point. The amount of results they're putting out already.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of tweaking of numbers that I imagine to take place.
So I guess for me, Cycle Storm obviously got new toys. Obviously Lord of the Rings has a cycle of swamp cyclers, so they must obviously be in it and make it really, really broken. Not quite. Instead, it runs absolutely 0 Lord of the Rings cards, I believe. None in the side, right? Not that I can see. And runs 0 new instance. Literally, as far as I can tell, a bog standard Cycle Storm list.
Yeah, as close as you can get a bog standard, I would say, for Cycle Storm. Yeah. There's nothing new. I don't even. I've not noticed this guy's name before. It's Rube 1618. I don't know if he just plays Cycle Storm a lot or if he was just sort of thought, I'll play the challenge with Cycle Storm. Which seems a pretty bold thing to do, but yeah, it's obviously worked out well.
From memory, I think either the first or second episode, there was a Cycle Storm in the top 32. And I believe it was this guy, and I think you're right. He just plays Cycle Storm, and he obviously just occasionally runs it, or he runs it every week, and we only see him once every 9 weeks.
Yeah.
But or he just plays it ad hocly, and every time he does, he's top 32, and this time he's even top 80. He came 3rd or 4th, and it's a sweet, to be fair. Cycle Storm's a sweet deck. It's pretty interesting. It definitely is completely different. And interesting enough, all joking aside about the new cyclers, I do think this deck probably is one of the decks that doesn't want to replace Ash Barons with the other ones. Because
Yeah.
playing an Ash Barons anyways is reasonable when everything cycles for one colourless.
And I
And
think including them as the creature in like the creature base, you really need the cards out of basically all your other cyclers.
yeah.
Um, the Ash Barons is sort of just like a nice include because it also taps for mana, but
Yep.
the rest you just need the cards out of, or you can't go off.
Yeah. And it's also effectively the four colour, I guess. Four colour land for them. Because they have a forest and a mountain in the sideboard for the Pyroblasts and the
Not the bone.
Not the Bun. But yeah, definitely a cool deck to see. I always do like seeing Cycle Storm, even though it is awful to play against in paper. Sweet one, I guess.
Yeah. Similar, some similar decks returning from the showcase as well. Even just in the top 8, there's that blue black Terror running Lorien. There's the Ponza running the Ents, and there's the Boros Synth, all just putting up consistent results. That the mono red, I guess, in this top 10's changed from the Burning Tree Kuldoffer build to just like the Pinger Burn build.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's sort of the main difference. I'm not sure. I ran Forge Chanter as well, but didn't run sort of the sack package with Club and Blast Runner. Just ran the Forge Chanters and then like Lava Darts and Serum Blazes as the extra burn cards.
I guess the only other interesting thing, or semi-interesting things, I guess I've got to mention is the Cleansing Wildfire deck, the Jeskai Ephemerate, didn't run. Yeah, it didn't run Cast into the Fire in the main.
No.
From the look of this, and it did run. It ran 2 Lorien Reveals and ran a Glacial Floodplain and a Volatile Fjord to kind of use it as colour fixing.
Yeah, still on the Scred package for the removal as well. I know some of them have sort of switched from like the Scred package to just the wildfire, not the wildfires in the main, the casting of the fires in the main, along with some journeys to like as a catch-all. Obviously with the Lorien you can tighten up your mana base quite a bit.
Still
so
on 22 lands.
Yeah, it's surprising really, especially with the Lorians in there and the 4 wildfires.
Very interesting. And I guess my other final thing, I guess, is Gardens in the top 8.
I was going to say, it's got to be a comment on Gardens, surely.
But it's a fairly interesting build. To be fair, it has 4 Annihilating Glare and 3 Mycosynth Wellspring as well, which is...
is that the search for a basic Echo Wellspring?
Yeah, so on. So it's pretty interesting. It kind of helps against Ponza matchup. And I think it was Adaptor was playing a list similar, trying this, and he wanted to like kind of maximize on Mycosynth Wellspring to help his Ponza matchup. Because as much as people keep telling me Ponza is a good matchup, it ain't a good matchup.
I think when you're on 4 Golgari Rock Farm as well, it's gonna feel a lot worse.
Yeah. But
no inclusion of Troll.
No
interestingly, Troll in Gardens. I thought that might be something people start to try. Troll or Ent, I guess. Troll's probably the way forward. I guess the Mycosynth Wellspring sort of does a bit of an impression of that anyway.
I tried a league with like Gardens with one of the jewels, the like Swamp Forest in that kind of Crystal Grotto flex slot, and then 2 Trolls. And it seemed fine. I didn't really cut on that. I think I cut 1 land. I went to 20 as opposed to 21, and then cut a. What did I cut? I think I cut like a creature of some description, like a vampire something or an Avenger. I mean, it was fine. It wasn't, absolutely blow me away, but it was still pretty okay.
I guess the big downside on it is if you are like going stacked on Trolls or any of the 1 mana land cyclers really, and cutting lands, it makes the Golgari rock farms a lot worse,
Yeah.
and it makes a lot more hands that you can't keep. Like if you have rock farm as your one land and then a land cycle, it's just like unkeepable hand.
Yeah.
So I guess it's maybe one of those decks where the mana base would have to change quite a bit, and then you lose sort of the County Garden rock farm synergy. So it's maybe just not worth it.
Yeah. It's pretty similar, like as we spoke about last week with FAMs, how Lorien Vale doesn't just straight up take over Ash Barrens, because you have that Ash Barrens-y Azorius Chancery kind of thing going on. And it's kind of similar in the sense that you can't keep hands with Rock Farm plus Troll.
Yeah, I like the Wellspring with the Annihilating Glares as well. Like having 7 Wellsprings that you don't mind sacrificing makes Glare seem a lot more playable. Obviously, it's never hitting a Planeswalker, but it'll hit a fair few creatures on turn 3. I guess you can even, because you can sack a creature as well, so it's even turned on turn 2 if you have a Calmly Garden into a Swamp. So it's not the worst for taking down some Swift Spears early.
Yeah, it's
one Raven's Crime and 1 Fengram Marauder in the main as well. Seems pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess with 4 rock farms, you've obviously got a lot of like returning lands, so you can kind of just fuel it a little bit. 1 Sprout Swarm in the side as well is pretty interesting. Just
I am a fan of Sprout Swarm.
Yeah, me too. Especially if they don't have any sort of discard or counter, golden.
It's just 1 card win con, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's all you need. Definitely a sweet one. Definitely a sweet take on it too. One thing that I have noticed as well, just to slightly touch on, is I thought I was a big Lembas believer in Gardens, and the more I play Gardens, the more I'm off Lembas, to be fair. I think just the extra card just straight up is so much better. If I wasn't on Mycosynth Wellspring, which I'm unsure about as of yet, I'm a bit on the fence. I could see the Lembas being 5 through 8 or 5, any of those sort of numbers. But I definitely think 4 Wellsprings is probably where I want to be first and foremost.
I think that's what we seem to be seeing in decks like Gardens and Affinity. Obviously the Lembas is a lot better if you're looking for one specific card or like a few specific cards. But where you just want the raw card advantage. Like obviously Gardens, you don't really care what removal spell you draw, for example, or what creature you draw. They're all going to be decent. So, and same for Affinity, when you just want that sheer amount of cards, just the Ichor Wellsprings just being better. Even the utility of the game 3 life doesn't seem enough to sort of swing that decision.
Yeah, I also think it's good on its own. Lembas is good on its own if you are digging for that, like say that 3rd land drop, or you don't have the Deadly Switch to chain it. But especially in this particular instance with Mycosynth Wellspring, that's just far and few between. You just have it here. You might as well.
I guess that's the thing, really. It's all hinged on Deadly Dispute, isn't it? If you Deadly Dispute and Ichor Wellspring is probably just better. Yeah.
So interesting enough, I guess. But I think overall, that's pretty much it. We've obviously spoke about Ponza previously. I guess do we need to touch on Gates? I guess.
Yeah, we can have a look at Gates.
Let's have a look.
It's a fairly stock blue-white Gates list from what I remember.
Run a Behold.
There's a 1 cast into the fire in the main instead of the
Smash to Dust.
The Smash to Dust, and there's a 1 Behold the Multiverse. I'm not really sure what that's sort of replacing or in place of.
Maybe a Preordain, I guess, by looks of this potentially. Would only be 3.
Otherwise, just you 4 Squadron Hawks, you 4 Cats. Only 1 Dawnbringer. Usually, I guess there's 2, 3 sometimes. 2 Guardians, your 4 Journeys, 4 Modern Ages, and then just your suite of Counterspell, Brainstorm, Prismatic Strands, Preordain, and then those 1-offs that we spoke about.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet list. I guess the only thing I can see potentially changing here somewhat or I would question here, is the Ash Barrens in the main. I probably would just change it to a Lorien Revealed it's free
Yeah,
enough.
the one of Ash Barons. Yeah, I can see that.
But
What is the white one mana cycler from? Is it an eagle?
yeah, I think it's 5 and a white for an eagle that gives attacking creatures +1/+0. I think, and first strike. I think it is. I think it's like a 3/6 flyer. Not awful.
No, probably not as good as just 3 cards off the lorry, to be fair, but possibly something to consider given you've got gates. And if it is a sort of an anthem for your little guys, it could be pretty good with Squadron Hawks and Modern Ages, but
yeah, might be worth considering for sure. And it helps with strands. It's a white creature as well.
Yeah,
definitely something to consider.
But yeah, just a fairly stock blue-white gates list, which it's good to see come back. To be honest, it's a sweet deck. That sort of just got shoved out the way for the past few weeks.
Yeah. But for no real reason either. It's just, I don't know if it's just the play patterns aren't exciting for people, or I don't think it particularly got trounced by things from what I can think of, but it just kind of just took a sideline. So definitely interesting.
I guess it probably doesn't line up great against Ponza.
Yeah.
Would be my thing, because you're gonna, without Basilisk Gate, you're not killing them many times soon. Like, all you guys are basically 1/1s or 2/3s. So yeah, without the Basilisk Gate, if the tech 2 of your gates out, you're probably going to struggle to win that game against a 5/7 and a 6/3.
I guess.
And Ponza has obviously been tremendously high numbers at the moment. That's the only thing I can really think of.
Yeah, I could see that, I guess. Definitely.
Do you want to move on to your selected deck from this challenge?
Yes. So I'm just trying to figure out where I'm at. So so the deck that I chose to deep dive into is a Mono Black Reanimator, which came 18th place by Medvedev. I'm gonna go with. And that came 18th place, which is...
It is a sweet one, this. When I first looked at it, I was like, oh, it's Mono Black Control. And then I kept reading down. I was like, oh, no, it's not. Wait a minute. No, it's not.
So, I guess I kind of just got to roughly read the deck list out, to be fair. So, it does kind of look like Mono Black Control to start with, because it's got 4 Kumbhaj Witches, 4 Thorn of the Black Rose, 4 Horror of the Broken Lands, 1 Vampire Sovereign, 3 Gurmag Angler, 4 Troll of whatever the hell that's called. Khazad-dûm. And then it's got 1 Gift of Orzhova, 4 Snuff Out, 4 Cast Down, 1 Defile, 2 Fumes, 1 Unexpected Fangs, 4 Exhume, 1 Duress, 2 Chain's Edict in the main, with 4 Bogs, 1 Witch's Cottage, 4 Barrymore, and 11 Swamps to round it off. So what it looks like to me is it's using all this removal plus Bajuka Bog to empty your opponent's graveyard, and the maximum number of black, I think, 1 mana cyclers, i.e. Horror of the Broken Lands, which is a 5 mana 4/4 with black cycling, and it gets bigger every time something's cycled or discarded. And then 4 of the new card, Lord of the Rings Swamp Cycler for 1, so it can basically just turn to Exhume, a big dude, and kill its way to victory, or suit it up with a Gift of Orzhova or an Unexpected Fangs as well, and just make it so the game's unlosable. Is kind of the consensus.
Yeah, it is a sweet list. It's one of those where it's a shame Terra is as good as it is, because that's probably hampering this deck quite a lot, having to play the 4 Bogs. And if you're against Terra, it's a pretty sketchy to try and like go off early. If they're just like thought scour themselves or whatever, a mill Terra or an Angler, you sort of like in a race that you don't really want to be in, especially if you're on Horror. But yeah, it is cool. It's nice to just slot that sort of essentially 4 Horror, 4 Exhume, 4 Trolls into Mono Black Control.
Yeah.
It gives Mono Black Control something a bit more powerful to be doing, rather than just trying to kill everything and then eventually play some carries.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that I've been messing about with, to be fair, because you don't even have to go to as far as obviously Horror, and you can just go Troll Exhume and kind of just have that in, especially with this particular list where it's very creature oriented anyways, you've got obviously your Thorns, you've got your Gurmaganglers, you've got your Vampire Sovereign. You kind of gain a value somewhere with these biggish creatures or powerful creatures, I guess, because you can reset your Monarch. You can obviously just have a 6/5 that basically is almost unblockable, or a generic 5/5, or a Bolt on a stick. These are the pretty cool things to do.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I would look at if I was looking to build this deck. Is just go 4 Troll, 4 Exhume. Obviously, your 4 Troll means you can cut down on the mana base a bit anyway, and gives you more space in mono black control to fit stuff that you maybe wouldn't normally fit, like this Gift of Autos over, which is again a sweet one. It's something that when it got downshifted, I always thought it would see a lot more play than it has. Like, it hasn't really seen that much play at all. For anyone who doesn't know, it's a 1 and hybrid black white. So 3 mana enchantment, and it gives enchanted creature +1/+1 flying and lifelink. For 3 mana, if you put it on a Gurmagangler or a Troll or even a Thorn, it's a pretty good raid.
Yeah, the only place I've really seen it was like the very early days of like Corgate, and it was just kind of a 1 or a 2 of, because it was a Spirit Link or a Life Link that you could put on a Guardian, and it's a pretty cool one, to be fair. Definitely a sweet addition. Unsure how much it lines up to basically that over a second copy of Unexpected Fangs. I guess the flying's very relevant. But yeah, it's a pretty cool take on the deck, because with the Kumbars, Witches, and the Thorns, and even I guess the Horrors to some extent, you can kind of just play a normal game plan too. So like 4 Exhumes isn't necessarily like the be all and end all. Just full to spell bombs and other bugs that decks will be packing because of Terror. So
yeah, also lifelink on Kumbars, which seems good.
Yeah, that is definitely something.
But yeah, it's a super cool deck. I look forward to seeing your video on this, because there's definitely one going to go.
Yeah, it might not be this exact list, but this style of deck, anything with Troll and Exhume, is definitely on the horizon, because it's definitely there. There's nothing really exciting, I guess, to say on the sideboard or anything. I guess there's a Memory Lake, but that's just a Duress that has cycling to buff the Horror. I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a fairly stock looking mono black sideboard, but it's more that engine, especially with the Horror and like maxing out on the 4 Baron Moors to get a bit more value out of that, as alongside your 4 Trolls as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's a couple of Suffocating Fumes as well. So you do have a decent number of cyclers to if you turn 2 Horror, you can turn 3 cycle 1 or 2 cards and get him for a big chunk.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely a sweet one. Sweet deck.
Yeah. Do you want to move on to Sunday, our final challenge for this week?
Yeah. You can take it away.
Yeah. Another pretty varied top 10, to be honest. First place was Jeskai FM. I believe it was Hyson as well from the format panel, which is obviously great to see. The people dictating the format, doing well and playing the format. I always seem to see Hyson playing, if not Jeskai FM, something with tapped artifact lancing. And usually Wildfire and Ephemerate as well. But yeah, it's super cool to see him doing well with that. Second place was Affinity, crushing it as always. Third and fourth was another Boros Synth, or from the previous top 8, and a Ponza that was also running the end package. And then 5th through 8th was a Blue Black Terror, a Ping of Burn, another Affinity, and a Mono Blue Fair, which is interestingly the first Fair we've seen in these 3 top 10s. And then the near misses in 9th and 10th, Blue Black Fair for a change, and another Blue Black Terror would run in the Lorien package.
Yeah, so, running 16 lands as well with the 10th plus.
Yeah.
So gone up a little bit.
Again, another big challenge for Terror. just seem to have crushed it this week. There's a Terra in every top 8 and multiple Terras in the top 10s. Obviously on an absolute tear. I'm not sure what's... Obviously Lorien's a big addition, but there's multiple, like that 5th through 8th place Blue Black Terra didn't run any. The Terra from the Saturday challenge that also come 5th through 8th didn't run any either. So it's not even like they're all on it. But yeah, it's definitely been a good 2-3 weeks for Terra.
Yeah, and it does seem like it's kind of weird. It's maybe the meta's just shifted. That's the only other thing I can think of, because as you said, there's not a lot of, like, not all of them are on Lorien or new toys kind of thing. It's just literally been pretty good position for it. Maybe it has a good Ponza matchup. Maybe you can just or with the root of Pingerburn or lack of Kuldotha, maybe I don't know, that's kind of helped it a bit. Who knows? It's just definitely a good time to be a Terra player, that's for sure.
And a good week for Ponza as well. Obviously, all 3 lists came third or fourth, and they're all running at the end.
Yeah.
I believe the 2 of them were piloted by the same guy as well, which is pretty impressive. So back-to-back top 8s. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a sweet one. Interestingly, as you say, the mono blue fair, obviously the first time seeing that in the top 8. And again, nothing out the ordinary, nothing new. It's just, I guess there's 2 Vapor Snags in this particular list. And fully stocked sideboard for Burn and Affinity with a couple of relics in the side.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know, maybe it's just not the weekend for fair. Not many spell stutters getting returned to the hand, I guess, is just a bad run.
No, it's basically only what this blue black fair, or this mono blue fair, sorry, and then the blue black fair 9th that we've seen. That one again, I don't think it's massively different to normal. I think it runs Lorien, but only a few. Doesn't run the max 4. And it's maybe cut one land from like a regular blue black fair list. But yeah, it doesn't seem like a great week for spell stutter Sprite.
No, which I'm not upset about by any stretch of the means, that's for sure. It's had its time in the sun over the past few weeks before this, so yeah, definitely nice to have a break from fair. It was nice to see the blue black though as well, especially utilising as you say, utilising the Lorien. And just touch on, I think that they've got their head screwed on the blue black fair pilot, or they listen to this podcast, because they ain't running the Snowlands for absolutely zero reason. They did choose the contaminated aquifer, so it must be obviously a listener.
They are just running 11 snow-covered islands though, just for crap.
Yeah, well...
the swamps aren't snow-covered and the jewels aren't snow-covered, but the islands are snow-covered.
Clearly likes the picture.
yeah. I'm not really sure what that's trying to represent, but it's pretty funny. But yeah, it doesn't really make sense. If you're not utilising the snow, you don't need to give Ponza that random extra value. Obviously, 1 life's not a lot, but it can matter.
Especially when you're attacking with 1/1s.
Yeah, especially in a deck where you're just chipping them away.
But yeah, definitely sweet one. I guess we should touch on Hyson's deck, because he actually went completely undefeated. He went 10-0 the whole.
That's pretty impressive.
Very, very impressive, with 4 cast into fire in the main and 2 Lorien revealed. So definitely gone on the whole Lord of the Rings life, I guess.
Yeah, it's cut the screds as well, which is sort of what I was touching on before. Just running basically bolts, casting the fires, and journeys as his removal. The 4 casting the fires in the main as well means he's being able to cut dust to dust from the side.
Yeah.
So normally Jeskai FM's just basically jams 4 dust to dust in the side. He's cut it down to 2. Obviously you've got that extra artifact removal in your main anyway. So it's not as important.
Interesting enough though, as well, generally Affinity Jeskai Ephemerate game plan against Affinity is, I'm going to dust to dust, then I'm going to Ephemerate this Arcane Answer, and then I'm going to dust to dust you. you get access to that basically in the main deck anyways with the 4 cast interfires, and you can also do it at a much higher rate too because it only costs 2. So you can just cast interfire, ephemerate, cast interfire, ephemerate, cast interfire in one turn a lot sooner than you can double dust to dust.
Yeah, it's obviously not as white intensive either.
Yeah.
Which it doesn't run a huge amount of white sources. I think there's 7. So if you want to like double dust to dust in one turn, you've got your work cut out for you.
Yeah.
Cool one I seen in the sideboard is a 1/of Fault Grinder.
Yeah.
Which, if for anyone who doesn't know, is 6 and a red for a 4/4 trample. When it enters the battlefield, it destroys a land, but you can evoke it for 4 and a red.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeskai FM getting on that Ponza train.
Yeah. Heisen's been a big fan, especially of like random wildfire piles for a while, and ephemerate piles. He's definitely big on this. I seen him. Well, this was a while ago, probably about a year ago now, when he was playing like a Boros ephemerate. I think it was, or was it? Oh, no, it was a Mardu ephemerate. I think it was, and he used is it Mornwelk? Is that the card?
It's the discard.
Yeah.
Discard 2.
So it's discard 2. I can't remember the actual cost, but it's 4 mana to evoke, and then you basically discard 2, and you can ephemerate it obviously to make them discard 4 cards. Yeah. And they ran Fault Grinder as well as a way to just blow up all the lands, and also Solar Migration as basically like a win con.
Yeah.
So I have seen him play Fault Grinder. He clearly must be a big fan to put 1 in the sideboard in his Jeskai Ephemerate deck. It'd be interesting to see how many times he bought it in. I guess he just didn't want to lose to Tron.
Yeah.
I guess.
Or Gates.
Yeah. But definitely a sweet one. Sweet edition.
Yeah. Past that, the sideboard's fairly stock. Obviously, you've cut down to 2 Dust to Dust, then just stacked on 4 Pyroblasts, 4 Hydroblast, and a Blue Elemental Blast, as most sideboards seem to be nowadays. Then just a couple of Dawnbringers and a Destroy Eagle as like a bit of a tech.
Yep.
Card that can come in and like against either Poggles or big guys.
Again, another thing to iterate that maybe a lot of people overlook: Cast Into the Fire being a great card, not for how good it is, because it is also a good card, but how much it basically unbans your sideboard.
Yeah.
If you can run Cast Into the Fire into your deck, put it into your deck just because it gives you access to like 4 extra sideboard slots, because it just trims it down so much.
I think this list's a good example of that, really. Exactly. If you don't run the Cast Into the Fire, you probably have 2 more Dust to Dusts and 1 or 2 Revokes.
Yeah.
So the 2 Dawnbringers, the Destroy Evil, and the Fault Grinder are all gone from the sideboard because it's just more of the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, by getting the 4 Cast Into the Fire, you free up that sideboard space.
Yeah, definitely.
And have a useful tool.
Yes. The card is not just also good, it also unbans sideboards, which is the thing that takes it over the edge for me. For sure. Yeah, I don't think I've got anything else to touch on this list. I think there's the Boros Synth was a bit weird. I say weird, just not what like pop again level. Yeah, so it runs 3 Seeker of the Way.
Cool. It's a bit more of an old style Boros Synth.
And 2 Kuldotha Rebirth. So yeah, it's very much like an old style Boros Synth
but still on obviously the Battle Fists.
Yeah.
And 2 Relics in the main as well.
Yeah.
Seems like a pretty good call at the moment with the amount of terror that's about.
Yeah.
Obviously Boros Synth doesn't have the best way to answer terror's creatures. Because they're so big and yet your removals basically burn spells. It seems wise to have some amount of relics in the main.
Yeah. And to no one's surprise, the 4 red elemental blasts again. Probably an easier way to deal with terror. The best way to deal with it is on the stack, otherwise you are pretty screwed.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely sweet one. It's cool to see Seeker of the Way. Interesting to really think why they're on Seeker of the Way. Unsure if their life matters that much, but
yeah, maybe scared of a bit of burn. There's not a huge amount of placement getting gained from burn. There's like 1 or 2, 1 in most of those top 10s. But actually in the top 32s in general, there is a decent amount. Especially, I guess, in Seeker in the Boros Synth is also pretty solid.
Yeah.
It basically bashes through all their creatures while stacking you up on life, so you can't be burnt out by the card advantage.
Yeah. True. But yeah, definitely a sweet one.
Do you want to move on to the final deck that you've picked from Sunday?
Yeah. So the last deck to talk about again is another 19th place because we like that sort of bar.
That range.
Yeah. And it is, I'm calling it Club Kuldotha, but it's basically just Kuldotha Red. It was ranked by Bako is what I call him, but it's Bako De Gea. I'm gonna go with. I can't pronounce his full name. Apologies if I've butchered that. Um, but yeah, it is the 19th place list, and it's Club Kuldotha basically because it runs 4 improvised club from Lord of the Rings, and um, it's basically a shrapnel blast that you can also sacrifice a creature that deals 4. We touched on it last week, which is kind of the reason why I want to highlight it. Is it's a card that personally I think it can be seen as a trap, and this sort of deck here is probably, if I was to run club, this is kind of the shell that I would imagine it in. So it doesn't run any draw twos, no Ren's Resolve, no Reckless Impulse. It is a Kuldotha list running 4 Blast Runners, 4 Swift Spears, 4 Epicures, and 3 Bushwhackers. And then it's already got the 4 Galvanic Blasts in there and 1 Fire Blast itself, which I think is probably the right number since you're not running Ren's Resolve and Reckless Impulse. Yeah. And then goes for Improvised Club, which is basically, I'm seeing it as Galvanic Blasts 5 through 8. And to compensate that, it's got 4 Synths, 4 Implement of Combustion, and also 2 extra Chromatic Stars as well. So
yeah, it is a cool one. Obviously, you're not running any of the draw twos is completely different from what we've seen basically since Reckless Impulse was printed. It was in Kuldotha. This reminds me of basically when Blast Runner come out, the Kuldotha list that were running it. But essentially, you've just took the 4 Reckless Impulse out and put 4 improvised clubs in. It does give you a lot of reach, especially with the 4 Gal Blasts. But you are leaning pretty heavily on your synths and your little cantrip artifacts for your card draw. I guess the 4 Swift Spear, 4 Blast Runner as well, giving you that repeatable damage, makes that reach off the clubs a bit more appealing as well.
Yeah, especially since usually you would probably get to a point where you're swinging for 2 or 3 creatures and you usually lose on one of those to trade in the other damage, and you can easily just throw that club that one to the face to add that extra damage.
One of the big missing factor is there's no Chain Lightnings in this deck at all. The burn is just the 4 Gal Blasts, 4 Bolts, 4 Clubs, and 1 Fire Blast. There's no Lava Darts, there's no Chain Lightnings. There's no like Serum Blaze. It's basically all creatures, and then your 2 4 or your 9 4-point burn spells and 4 bolts.
Which is good because to me that's a lot of reach.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is pretty good. So you only need a couple, add 2 or 3 swings off your Blast Runner or Swift Spear. And club triggering both Swift Spear and Blast Runner in a positive way is pretty nice too.
Sideboard as well. It's clearly pretty well thought out. There's the 4 raises that you'd expect in the forecasting of fires. There's also a couple of Mind Collapses, which obviously a good tool for terror. But Secret Mode triggers your Goblin Blast Runner. Raise is the same. It's not destroy a land you control and destroy land they control. It's sacrifice a land you control. So again, also triggers Goblin Blast Runner. And then to complement the casting of fires against Bay, you've got End of Festivities, and against Affinity, you've got 2 more Gorilla Shamans. So it splits its tools pretty nicely that way.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and as you said, it obviously is well thought out, and I'm assuming that's kind of why there's no relics to look at fighting called Terror. Because it doesn't sacrifice, it exiles itself, right?
Yeah, it does. I feel like as well, you're basically just trying to outrace them looking at this build, or at least get a lot of damage in first and then quickly burn them out.
Yeah.
The Mind Collapse is just a bit of a catch-all if you need that extra bit of damage going through. Buff your Swift Spear, triggers your Blast Runner, gets the blocker out of the way for the Swift Spear.
Yep.
But yeah, a cool take on Mono Red. I don't know if this will be sort of a stock take. 4 clubs does seem like a lot, and no draw twos seems like a big miss. But I like the theory behind it. I like the look of the list.
Yeah, the list's definitely well thought out. Definitely a lot of numbers that you can see in the list that you think this has been somewhat tested. Like they've obviously went in with in their mind that I want to run 4 blasts, 4 Galv Blast, sorry, and 4 Improvised Club. How is the best way to make that work?
Yeah.
And that's definitely what they've done here, because that is for sure 2 stars as well. Like that's what I mean. Like that's what I'm like. You can see that that's well thought out. Like forcing 4 implement isn't enough. I just need 2 more. But I do think Chain Lightning does look, as you say, it looks like a miss from here, and probably something should give. Maybe a club, maybe Bushwhackers, maybe some stars. But I could definitely see some sort of Lightning Bolt 5 and 6. Give you that little bit more reach, just so you don't need the creatures as much.
Yeah, that's it.
But sweet deck all round, and congrats on the 19th place. Anything else to cover from this deck?
No, that's it from me.
So just a quick shout out to we've already kind of previously mentioned them. Heisen, first of all, on his 10-0 streak, and repping the PFP. Always good to see Heisen and Weber and that in the challenges. Definitely an incredible take for a 10-0 as well. And I guess finally, is it Chaton, I guess I'm pronouncing it. The Ponza Master, top 8 in 2 of the challenges. I believe it was the 2 Saturday challenges? I think it was. But yeah, top 82 the Saturday challenges with Ponza. Nice.
Yeah, it wasn't the Sunday, it was the showcase and the Saturday regular.
Yeah. So pretty cool, and clearly making the generous end stock with the Sunday Ponza player rocking basically your list, it seemed like.
Yeah, the exact list, yeah, pretty much.
So shout out to those, I guess, is probably where I'm at. Any other shout out from yourself?
No, I think that's enough for me.
Hot takes from last week.
We've changed this from expectations to hot takes because they just felt more like hot takes than expectations.
Well, mine were definitely hot takes, that's for sure.
My first one was that more Lord of the Ring cards would show up than we've seen last week. Particularly Lembas, I said, but that seemed like a bit of a miss. In general, it seems like a hit. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of Lorien and a lot of End, alongside some trolls and loads of Cast into the Fires. Lembas seems like the one that everyone sort of expected to be the best one, or tied for the best with Cast in the Fire, and just hasn't really got there yet. So I think that's sort of half a hit, half a whiff.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, mainly, I think you're right. I definitely overestimated Lembas for sure. And Lorien revealed an end, or that cycle is definitely overperforming over Lembas for me, for sure. I guess my last week's hot take, my first one was more anti-Ponza tech, and well, I don't want to say this was a hit because it definitely wasn't. There was no bridges in decks that didn't need bridges, or running Evolve on Wild instead of the Nuka Penna fetches, but I would say it's half a hit in the sense that we've seen Kiln Fiend, Elves, things like that appear where they wouldn't normally appear, because let's be honest, those decks are pretty hard done by in the other wide scheme meta, but they're free Ponza matchups.
Yeah, that's fair.
So yeah, not a hit, but I wouldn't say it was so out of there that it was completely wrong.
And I guess my last one sort of tags onto that, which was decks from outside the sort of standard metagame of 6 or 7 decks that we see all the time doing well. Obviously we had Cycle Storm, we had Blue White Gate, we had Kiln Fiend. There was a lot of sort of random outlier decks that did really well. Poison Storm, Walls. So yeah, that was a pretty cool one to see.
Yeah.
Hopefully it continues, because it's always sweet just looking at a top 8 and being like, all right, that's fairly expected. Oh, look at that deck. I didn't expect that to be there. It makes it a lot more interesting.
Yeah, to be fair, if we're being brutally honest, everyone at home, like, it makes this show a lot easier to do when you're like, oh my god, look at this cool new thing that's just like, you didn't expect to see this. Like, we come in here, we expect Affinity, we expect Terra, we expect Synth, we expect Ponza, all this stuff, and then seeing Kiln Fiend here just is like, oh, even though it's not even like one of our favourite decks to play or whatever, it's just nice to discuss something we haven't talked about in a while.
So hot takes for next week.
Yeah. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, may as well. My first one was that we'll see more Kiln Fiend now. It's people have been reminded it exists and that it can do well. If you basically get good matchups, if you point it in the right direction, you can just crush essentially a tournament. So I expect we'll see a lot more. Maybe not a lot more, but more Kiln Fiend show up. Yeah, I think that's probably a reasonable guess.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see as well. To be fair, I ain't hating that. So my take is that I feel like we'll see more land cyclists see them play, even in I guess in places that we wouldn't normally see them. So we've kind of touched on this. Lorien obviously seen quite a bit of play this weekend. Trolls kind of started to get there with obviously the mono black control or the mono black devotion or whatever, and Ents kind of settled its way to Ponza, I'd say. So it'd be nice to see obviously more of those. Maybe even the white one as we discussed in Gates. Maybe the red one in something, I guess. I don't know.
I think that's sort of something that's missing from the Pauper metagame, is like a big red deck. Which will probably be the perfect home for the Mumakil. But yeah, it obviously they're getting dual lands as well and costing 1 mana.
Yeah.
So they are playable in a lot of decks. As Tyson showed with playing them in Lorien and Jeskai FM. But yeah, it seems like a reasonable shout. Again, I guess my next one sort of ties into that, would be Terra becoming more locked into Lorien. So we've seen the couple out of the masses of Terra in the top 10s that we've just talked about. We've obviously seen a few that weren't running the Lorien package. I expect basically we'll define Terra more towards, you run this many lands and you run 4 Loriens, as opposed to the sort of classic Terra that runs none.
Yeah, I guess just expand on that. I think probably over the next week, maybe even the week after, you'll probably get that where they'll all eventually lock into Lorien. And then I think, to be fair, what will end up happening is the differences in lists would probably land count is where I'm thinking, is that'll be the unknown. If they're going to run the 15 lands and the 4 Loriens, or if they're going to run 17 lands and 4 Loriens or whatever, and kind of go. And I think that'll, because I think Lorien's the real deal in Terra. So
especially in Terra, especially given that it has that low spell effect for the Terra. It's just huge.
Definitely. And I guess my final one is that, unfortunately, but that's my personal opinion, Jeskai Ephemerate will probably take a serious uptick, especially with Heisen's undefeated streak. And that sort of list as well will probably cement itself. The forecast into the fire main with the Loriens as well, with the beachfront and the blue-red duel. Like, that sort of list will kind of probably cement itself as the list, moving away from the Screds, as we've touched on.
It is a very good deck. The player pattern to play against is pretty horrendous. But we do have that with a few decks in Pauper at the moment. They're not the most fun decks to play against, but they are strong, and it is a bit of a different angle for the meta game, so it's not the worst thing if that happens.
No, for sure.
But I do agree that is probably likely.
Yeah, and that's it for me.
Yeah, all good.
So, guys, if you have enjoyed this podcast, please, please, please share it with your friends, all the people at the local game store. We are working hard here for the Cast and Commons podcast, and if you are enjoying it, it would be really appreciated if you could just share it to people that might be interested in this, because we are trying to get, obviously, just ourselves out there, and it'd be really appreciated if you could, obviously, just pass us on to a friend. Even if they don't play Magic, just pass it on. We're really interested to talk about. So, but yeah, it'd be really appreciated if you could, obviously, show us some love, basically. And that's enough of me shilling out. That is all from us at Cast and Commons. Until next time, and don't forget to stay hydrated.
See ya.